In Russia, Ukraine and Belarus, people are used to negotiating with each other, and sometimes they're very surprised that in Europe or the US it is not accepted and people live and work according to laws and rules. The word negotiate is often perceived as a bribe or some service in return. In this video I will talk about the attitude toward bribes in Russia, Ukraine and Belarus, from the most harmless to the most dangerous for society. I'll talk about bribes in all spheres of life, from schools and kindergartens to the army and the police. I'll also talk about bribes for tens of millions of dollars. We have free healthcare, but unfortunately doctors who work in public clinics or hospitals have very low salaries, but they work a lot. Often because of this, they get very tired and don't work with the greatest enthusiasm. I don't know about now, but when I was a child and a teenager, there was a practice that in such a clinic, for a doctor to treat you well, you had to bring a box of candies or a bottle of something alcoholic as a gratitude. After that, they would smile at you and prescribe the medicine that you need. In fact, such gifts were given not only to doctors, but also to any people working in public institutions to establish a good relationships with them. I remember how my mom and I constantly bought candies for teachers at school on holidays. We also have a practice of gratitude when a doctor, for example, did a good job, and many people can thank him by bringing candies, a bottle of whiskey or an envelope with money. How do you feel about that? Is there a similar practice in your country? Write about it in the comments, I'm very interested. By the way, probably you haven't seen how we celebrate September the 1st in our countries. It's the first day of school. Everyone brings flowers and gifts to teachers, and it looks something like this. It's hardly related to the topic, it's more of an amusing observation that it's not done this way in other countries. Schools and kindergartens. We have a system where your child gets into a school or kindergarten based on your residence. If you want your child to attend a better school, there are two ways: connections, knowing the right people, and money. Almost always you can negotiate with the principal or administration of the school you want. For example, in my school there was a boy whose parents bought a lawnmower to the principal so that their son would be admitted to our school. If not directly to the principal, they might say you that you need to buy a TV for the class or something else for the school. And you should understand that collections from parents every year are the norm for our schools. If you are interested, I have a video about schools in Russia, Ukraine and Belarus. There I talk about how children are turned into zombies. You can watch it with a hint. University. Mostly people get into university by themselves, of course not considering cases of very wealthy people whose children can enter any university without exams. But sometimes it's easier to study and graduate from university by paying the teachers for grades on exams. And you have such possibility. I know that in Russia this is a common practice and everyone who pays certain amount of money gets diplomas. I have encountered a similar situation, but we had only one teacher who took money for you to pass his subject. In fairness, he offered courses for this money and actually conducted additional classes. Along with the courses, there was an assessment on the exam. And this is actually not the only problem of our education system. If you are interested in this topic, write about it in the comments, and also you can watch the video in the suggestion. Now I think you understand that diplomas from our countries sometimes are just pieces of paper and may mean absolutely nothing. By the way, to get a good job you often have to pay money, especially if these are state companies. And of course, often the management hires their relatives or acquaintances first. Sometimes new positions are even created for them. Bribes within the traffic police. Analyzing reports on how much money drivers offer to resolve issues on the spot to traffic police officers, one can speculate about the prevalence bribery on the roads. Some start from $50 and bribes in the range of $100–150 are common. This is how intoxicated drivers attempt to solve issues they would officially have to pay $300 for. That is how you can settle matters when driving under the influence in Russia. Very often paying around $200 is required to pass the driver's license exam. To give you an idea of the scope of the problem, analysts estimate that a third of all motorists bribed traffic police officers in the past year in Russia. The initiative for collecting bribes in the traffic police often comes from superiors, rotary commanders and department heads, who push subordinates to take money from offenders and share the proceeds. As such schemes are not uncommon, traffic police officers are caught accepting bribes with remarkable frequency. If one manages to negotiate with the local police department, many issues can be resolved, or one's illegal activities protected. They have many schemes. However, the largest bribes are for terminating criminal prosecution or reclassifying a case to a lighter charge. Yeah, that also can be bought. If you are interested in the topic of police bribes, comment about it and I'll create a full video on the subject. On the other hand, there are gratitudes to police officers that supposedly don't count as bribes. For example, one former officer described his actions. "I am an honest cop. People don't give me bribes, they thank me for good work." I couldn't discern where he drew the line between a bribe and gratitude. Unofficial proceeds reportedly range from 50 to 250% of a police officer's salary. Officers, especially local ones, establish good relationships with those they've helped, allowing for indirect material support. Buying goods at procurement prices, getting free haircuts, dining at cafes, having their car washed and repaired. According to police moral, these aren't considered bribes. There are also bribes within the internal police system. Payment is made for a transfer to another position, passing physical fitness standards, and so on. Clearly, a regular salary is not enough. Thus, a police officer takes bribe, keeps a portion, and hands the rest upwards. The main incentive for paying superiors is the promise of patronage and good relations. Another factor pushing police officers to pay is the unofficial protocols within units. Then there is how Ukrainian men crossed borders after the war began. An illegal border crossing through rivers, swamps, forests and mountains costs from $2,000 to $5,000. Special guides take entire groups and show them the way to cross the border into another country. There is also a legal and safe method. In Ukraine, there is a system for crossing borders for drivers transferring humanitarian aid and goods, as well as volunteers. One could enter this system for from $2,000 to $15,000, depending on demand at time. Once your name was added to the system, you could cross the border independently or as a part of a group at any border checkpoint. A white card, disability, or a serious diagnosis requiring treatment abroad is another popular escape plan from the country. For $2,000 within 2 days, intermediaries help military personnel to remove themselves from military register and even cancel military conscription orders. Bribes on the front line in the Russian army. A Russian officer from a motorized infantry unit talked about bribes in the Russian army. According to him, soldiers can buy a concussion, meaning a wound requiring hospitalization, for from $10,000 to $50,000, depending on the military rank and the frontline area. Leave costs from $5,000 to $10,000, and transferring from one section of the front to another or an early rotation costs from $500 to $3,000. And here is a bit of surrealism. In Moscow, a colonel from the general staff, responsible for conscription, was placed under house arrest. He asked a military commissar for a bribe in the form of a washing machine. The colonel suggested that the military commissar buy him a washing machine costing at least $700 to avoid the consequences of the inspection and get a positive review of the work of the military register and enlistment office. Later, the colonel explains that he urgently needed a washing machine after repairing his apartment, and he decided to obtain it in this manner. Yeah, there is actually a stronger fight against corruption. But the problem is that it's mostly a show. They arrest and imprison doctors for taking a chocolate bar or a box of sweets, while those covering up criminals build castles and buy yachts. They continue the same practice with ease. Of course, each significant corrupt figure has a case, and often they're just allowed to continue. They must be 100% loyal to the authorities, because once they commit a wrongdoing, they could end up behind bars. Couple of times a year we hear about the arrest of some important figures for corruption. Here are some examples of people who have been imprisoned for taking bribes. In the last year, a Moscow investigator was accused of receiving a bribe of 1032 bitcoins. He stored wallet codes in a folder named Pension. According to the investigation, he received the cryptocurrency from members of the hacking group to prevent the investigator from seizing the hacker's assets. Also, in the past year, the head of the Supreme Court of Ukraine was arrested for a $2.7 million bribery case. A former head of the Clean District in the Moscow region had assets worth $140 million confiscated by the court in 2019. This included 1,700 real estate objects. In 2016,
the deputy head of the main Directorate for Economic Security and Counteraction of Corruption of the Russian Interior Ministry
was found in possession of $120 million and €2 million in cash. Unfortunately, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Corruption in Russia, Ukraine and Belarus remains one of the most significant problems, affecting every aspect of life. If you are interested in this or any other topic, feel free to comment about it. Thank you for watching and have a good day. And don't forget to watch other videos.